Callie stood at the cemetery gates, dirt still fresh on Thomas's grave, when her mother-in-law, Diane, shoved legal papers against her chest. "Sign it, now." The documents trembled in Callie's hands, a relinquishment of all claims to the Hammond family estate. Behind Diane, Thomas's brother Preston leaned against a black Mercedes, smirking like he'd already won something. 3 months widowed, and they were circling like vultures who'd finally spotted dying prey. "Thomas wanted you to have security," Callie whispered, her voice still raw from crying. "He told me Thomas was an idiot who married a waitress." Diane's perfectly manicured finger jabbed toward Callie's face. "You think we didn't know? Coming to Charleston with your thrift store clothes and community college degree? You saw a dying man with money and pounced." If you're ready to watch entitled in-laws get exactly what they deserve, hit that subscribe button for the Formidable Revenge channel. Smash the like button because Callie's about to teach a masterclass in patience. Drop a comment telling us about the worst in-laws you've ever heard of. We read every single one. Preston pushed off the car, straightening his $1,000 suit. The house, the cars, the bank accounts, they revert to family. Real family. Not some opportunistic nobody who trapped our brother during his cancer treatments. Callie's fingers tightened on the papers. They had no idea. None of them knew that while Thomas lay dying, he'd discovered the truth she'd kept hidden for 2 years. The secret that made her heart shatter in completely different ways. "I loved him," she said simply. "Love?" Diane laughed, sharp and cruel. "You loved his last name. Hammond opens doors in this city. But those doors are closing, sweetheart. Sign the papers, take the $50,000 pity payment, and disappear back to whatever trailer park spawned you." The other funeral attendees were watching now. Thomas's country club friends, his college roommates, business associates, all witnessing his widow being gutted alive beside his fresh grave. Callie saw phones tilting up. Recording. This would be Charleston gossip for months. Her hand moved to sign, then stopped. Because across the cemetery, leaning against an oak tree, stood someone who shouldn't be there. Someone whose presence changed absolutely everything. Callie looked up at Diane, and for the first time since Thomas died, she smiled. No. 2 years earlier, Callie had been closing down Harborside Bistro when Thomas Hammond first walked through the door at 10:47 p.m. "Kitchen's closed," she'd said, not looking up from wiping tables. "I'm not hungry." He'd sat anyway, dress shirt wrinkled, eyes hollow. "I just got my diagnosis. Stage 4 pancreatic cancer. The doctor said 12 months, maybe 18 if I'm lucky. I drove around for 3 hours and this was the only place with lights on." Callie had poured 2 whiskeys. They talked until 3 a.m. He told her about his suffocating family, their shipping empire built on his grandfather's ruthlessness, how he'd been groomed since birth to be Hammond legacy material. She told him about her parents dying in a car crash her freshman year, about building herself from nothing, about dreams deferred and reinvented. He came back the next night, and the next. 3 weeks later, he proposed. "I know this sounds insane," Thomas had said, kneeling in the empty restaurant. "But I've spent 38 years being who they wanted. I've got maybe a year left to be myself. Spend it with me? No inheritance expectations, no obligations after I'm gone. Just companionship. Honestly. Someone who sees Thomas, not Hammond." Callie had said yes, knowing exactly what she was agreeing to. Grief, with a deadline. What Thomas didn't know, what she never told him until the morphine-hazed final weeks, was that Callie Reeves wasn't just some waitress. She was Callie Reeves, silent founder of Luminex Technologies, The encrypted communication platform she'd coded in her MIT dorm room now powered 70% of Fortune 500 secure messaging. She'd sold her shares for $2.4 billion 3 years ago, then vanished from tech circles completely. She'd been hiding in Charleston, waitressing for fun, when Thomas found her. And she'd fallen genuinely, devastatingly in love with a man who had months to live. "You're... what?" Thomas had whispered when she finally told him, 2 weeks before the end. "I never wanted your money," Callie had said, crying. "I wanted you." He'd died believing she'd protected his final year from being about anything but them. Now his family was trying to erase her from his memory entirely. The Hammond family didn't just want Callie gone. They wanted her destroyed. 1 week after the cemetery confrontation, Diane threw a celebration of life at the Charleston Yacht Club. Callie received an invitation hand-delivered by Preston. "Mother insists you attend," he'd said, eyes glittering with malice. "Final goodbye to Thomas. Unless you're too ashamed." Callie wore the same black dress from the funeral. No jewelry, hair in a simple bun. She looked exactly like what they wanted everyone to see, a poor woman playing dress-up. The ballroom sparkled with Charleston's elite, crystal chandeliers, champagne towers, a string quartet playing mournfully. Photographs of Thomas covered the walls. Childhood sailing trips, Harvard graduation, ribbon cuttings for Hammond shipping. Not a single photo included Callie. "Ladies and gentlemen," Diane's voice cut through conversation. She stood at the podium, microphone live. "Thank you for honoring my son tonight. Thomas was generous to a fault. Too generous, perhaps." Callie's stomach dropped. "Many of you met Thomas's widow." Diane spat the word like poison. "Callie came into our lives during Thomas's most vulnerable time. We tried to be welcoming. We tried to see what he saw. But a mother knows." Screens descended from the ceiling. Diane clicked a remote. Photos appeared. Callie waitressing at Harborside Bistro. Callie in her tiny apartment. Callie's beaten Honda Civic. Financial records appeared. Her meager bank statements from before the marriage. $3,000 in savings, Diane announced. "That's what she had when she met my dying son. Now look at this." Thomas's amended will appeared on screen. Everything. The townhouse, the cars, the trust funds, left to Callie. She convinced him to change his will 6 months into their marriage, Diane continued. While he was on chemotherapy, barely able to think straight. She manipulated him into disinheriting his actual family. Gasps rippled through the crowd. "Gold digger doesn't begin to cover it," Preston added, stepping beside his mother. "We're filing to contest the will. Undue influence, manipulation of a vulnerable adult. But tonight, Charleston needs to know exactly who Thomas married." Callie stood frozen as hundreds of eyes turned toward her. Phones rose, cameras flashed. "Leave," Diane commanded, "before we have security remove you." The crowd parted, a corridor of judgment leading to the exit. Callie could hear the whispers already starting, the story that would define her in this city forever. She walked toward the door, then stopped, turned back. "You're right about one thing, Diane," Callie said quietly. "Thomas did change his will because of me." She pulled out her phone. "He changed it because I told him who I really am." Diane's lawyer, Bernard Hutchins, was a shark in Armani who'd built his reputation destroying prenups and estate claims. He sat across from Callie in his mahogany-paneled office, barely containing his grin. "Mrs. Hammond, let's be realistic." He slid papers across the desk. "Your marriage lasted 19 months. My clients have documentation proving you met Thomas the same week he received his diagnosis. A jury will see a predator who hunted dying prey. Callie said nothing. The offer is generous. 200,000 and you walk away. Fight this, and we'll drag you through depositions, public testimony, every humiliating detail of how you targeted a vulnerable man. We'll prove you married him for money you never earned. Drop a comment right now if you can already see where this is going. And if you haven't subscribed to the Formidable Revenge channel yet, what are you waiting for? The revenge is about to get nuclear. Thomas loved me, Callie said softly. Thomas was dying and desperate. Bernard leaned forward. Here's what happens if you refuse. We go public with everything. Your real name, Callie Reeves. We found your background. Community college dropout. Worked at a tech startup that went nowhere. Some coding, some waitressing. A nobody who saw opportunity in a dying man's loneliness. They'd investigated her, but not well enough. We've already leaked the story to the Charleston Post, Bernard continued. Tomorrow's headline, Local Widow Contests Hammond Estate, Family Cries Fraud. We have witnesses who will testify Thomas was heavily medicated when he changed his will. We have his oncologist ready to discuss how chemo affects cognitive function. We have... When's the court date? Callie interrupted. Bernard blinked. 6 weeks, but... See you there. She left him sputtering about consequences and reality, but consequences were coming. Just not for her. That night, Callie received a text from Preston. Last chance. Take 100K and disappear or we destroy you. Your choice. She responded with a photo, herself at Harborside Bistro, the same place she'd met Thomas, raising a glass of whiskey to the camera. What the Hammonds didn't know, the man at the cemetery, leaning against the oak tree, was Nathan Aldridge, managing partner at Aldridge & Associates, the most powerful estate law firm in the Southeast. He'd been Callie's lawyer for 5 years, handling her trusts and investments. He'd also been gathering evidence, every tax return Thomas filed during their marriage, every lucid conversation he'd had with doctors confirming his mental competence, every love letter Thomas wrote Callie, unprompted and clear-headed. Thomas had known his family would attack, and he'd prepared accordingly. But Callie wasn't ready to show her hand yet. Because the Hammonds needed to commit completely. They needed to dig themselves into a hole so deep that when the truth came out, the fall would be catastrophic. So when the Charleston Post article ran, Gold Digger Widow Fights Hammond Fortune, Callie let it spread. When Diane went on local television calling her a parasite, Callie stayed silent. When Preston leaked falsified documents suggesting Callie had been married before, she hadn't. She let the lie breathe. She was waiting for something specific. The Forbes Billionaire list release was 3 weeks away. The deposition room smelled like expensive leather and coming blood. Diane sat across from Callie, Bernard beside her. Court reporters' fingers poised on the stenograph. Let's establish facts. Bernard's smile was a weapon. You met Thomas Hammond in late October, correct? Yes. 1 week after his cancer diagnosis? I didn't know about his diagnosis when we met. Convenient. Bernard slid a document forward. Bank records show you had exactly $3,047 in savings when you married Thomas. Now you're claiming rights to an estate worth $47 million. Quite an upgrade for a waitress. Callie met his eyes. Thomas wanted me to have security. Thomas was dying and vulnerable. Diane's voice cracked with manufactured grief. You manipulated my sick son. Your son hated you. The room went silent. Callie continued, voice steady. Thomas told me everything. How you forced him into business school when he wanted to study marine biology. how you picked his fiancée when he was 25, then destroyed that relationship when she disagreed with you, how you only called him after his diagnosis to discuss estate planning, not to comfort your dying child. Diane's face went white, then red. How dare you? He recorded conversations with you, Callie said. Hours of them. Should I play them for the court? She pulled out a small thumb drive. Bernard's hand shot out. That's inadmissible. South Carolina is a two-party consent state. Thomas consented. Before he died, he gave me permission to use them if you tried this. Callie's voice hardened. Every phone call where you asked about the will before asking about his pain levels. Every visit where you brought your lawyer instead of bringing comfort. Every time you called me that woman, while he was still alive to hear it. Diane stood abruptly. This deposition is over. Sit down, Mother. Everyone turned. Preston stood in the doorway, but he looked different. Defeated. He held his phone like it weighed 1,000 pounds. We have a problem, he said quietly. Diane's eyes narrowed. What problem? I just got a call from Hammond Shipping's chief financial officer. Someone bought 48% of our stock through shell companies over the past 6 months. We didn't notice because they were small purchases, different LLCs, scattered timing. Bernard frowned. Who? Preston looked directly at Callie. The purchases were routed through Luminex Technologies Acquisition Fund. The name hung in the air. Diane's confusion was almost comical. What's Luminex Technologies? But Bernard knew. His face had gone gray. You're joking. I'm not. Preston's voice was hollow. Luminex, the encrypted messaging platform. They went public 3 years ago and made their founder... He stopped. Swallowed. The company's founder was anonymous. Some MIT grad who coded the whole platform alone, then vanished after selling shares for billions. Callie stood slowly. Callie Reeves, she said quietly. MIT class of 2015, computer science. I developed Luminex in my dorm room sophomore year. Sold 70% of my shares when the company went public. I've been living off investments ever since. Diane actually staggered. No, that's impossible. You're a waitress. You're someone who wanted a quiet life after making more money than I could spend. Callie's voice was soft, but absolute. I waitressed because I liked it. I lived in a small apartment because I preferred simplicity. I drove an old car because it ran fine. Then I met Thomas, and he saw me. Not my money. Not my success. Just me. She turned to Preston. You want to know why I bought 48% of Hammond Shipping? Because Thomas told me you'd try this. He knew you'd attack me, try to erase me, call me a gold digger. So he asked me to protect his legacy the only way I could. By taking our company? Diane's voice was venomous. By making sure you can't destroy it. Callie picked up her bag. Board meeting is in 1 week. As the largest single shareholder, I'm calling for new leadership. She walked to the door, then paused. Oh, and Diane? Forbes publishes their annual billionaire list in 2 weeks. You might want to have tissues ready. Preston struck back with the precision of a cornered animal. 2 days after the deposition, every major news outlet in Charleston ran the same story. Tech billionaire accused of elder manipulation. Hammond family produces evidence of coercion. The documents were devastating. Medical records, supposedly from Thomas's oncologist, showing severe cognitive decline during the final months. Testimony from a nurse claiming Callie had isolated Thomas from his family. Financial statements suggesting Callie had transferred money from Thomas's accounts while he was incapacitated. All of it expertly fabricated. All of it impossible to immediately disprove. Callie's lawyer Nathan called at 6 a.m. They're going nuclear. The medical board is investigating. The SEC is asking questions about your stock purchases. They're painting you as someone who used her wealth to manipulate a dying man. The medical records are fake, Callie said. Proving that takes time. They're moving fast. Filed for an emergency injunction to freeze all assets pending fraud investigation. Judge Holloway is hearing it this afternoon. Judge Holloway, Preston's college roommate. At the hearing, Bernard presented his case with surgical precision. The forged medical records, the falsified witness statements, even a recorded phone call, completely fabricated, of someone claiming to be Callie discussing how to secure the inheritance. Your Honor, Bernard concluded, this woman used her technological expertise to deceive a dying man and his family. She may have billions, but that doesn't give her the right to defraud others. We request immediate asset freeze and full forensic investigation. Judge Holloway looked at Callie. Ms. Reeves, this is highly irregular. The evidence suggests... The evidence is manufactured. Nathan stood. We can prove these documents are forgeries, but we need time. Time to hide assets? Bernard interrupted. To move money offshore? Judge Holloway's gavel cracked. Emergency injunction granted. All assets frozen pending investigation. Ms. Reeves, you're not to access any accounts, make any transfers, or sell any holdings. Court will reconvene in 30 days. Callie sat frozen as the ruling came down. Everything frozen. Her accounts, her stocks, her ability to fight back. Preston had manufactured evidence and used connections to box her in completely. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed. Ms. Reeves, did you manipulate Thomas Hammond? How do you respond to accusations of elder abuse? Is it true you're under federal investigation? Diane stood on the courthouse steps, cameras rolling. Today, justice begins. This woman may have money, but she can't buy her way out of what she's done. My son is dead, and she stole his final months for profit. The performance was flawless. Grieving mother protecting her son's legacy. That night, Callie sat in her townhouse, Thomas's townhouse, their home, and felt the walls closing in. Everything she'd planned was frozen. The Hammond family had turned her wealth into a weapon against her. They'd painted her billions as proof of guilt rather than innocence. Her phone buzzed. Unknown number. Stop fighting or it gets worse. Withdraw the will contest. Sign over your shares. Disappear. Or tomorrow we release documents showing you hacked Thomas's medical records. FBI will have warrants by noon. Preston's voice, cold and certain. You can't win this, Callie. We own this city. You're just someone who wrote some code and got lucky. Go back to obscurity before we destroy you completely. Callie closed her eyes. For the first time since Thomas died, she felt truly alone. The woman who knocked on Callie's door at midnight shouldn't have existed. Stephanie Hammond, she said, extending her hand. Thomas's cousin. We need to talk. Callie recognized her vaguely from the funeral. Mid-40s, dressed like money but wearing it uncomfortably. She'd stood apart from Diane and Preston, hadn't spoken to anyone. Why should I trust you? Callie asked. Because I know where the bodies are buried. Metaphorically speaking. Stephanie pushed past into the townhouse. Thomas and I were close before Diane decided I was a bad influence. Want to know why? I asked questions about the company finances. She dropped a thick folder on the kitchen table. Hammond Shipping is broke, Stephanie said. Has been for 3 years. Preston has been cooking the books. Hiding losses, using investor money to cover operational shortfalls. Classic Ponzi scheme setup. They need Thomas's personal fortune to stay afloat, and they need you gone before anyone audits too closely. Callie opened the folder. Financial statements, offshore accounts, falsified reports to shareholders. Why bring this to me? Because Thomas called me a week before he died. Stephanie's voice cracked. He said if anything happened, if Diane and Preston came after you, I should give you everything. He knew, Callie. He knew they'd attack. And he prepared. More folders. Audio recordings. Emails between Preston and Bernard discussing the fake medical records 3 months ago, before Thomas even died. They'd planned this entire attack while Thomas was still breathing. There's more, Stephanie said. The nurse who testified you isolated Thomas? She's Preston's girlfriend. The oncologist who signed the cognitive decline documents? He lost his license 2 years ago. They're paying an actor. Callie stared at the evidence. Why are you doing this? Thomas was good. Really good. In a family of sharks, he was the only one with a soul. Stephanie's eyes hardened. And they're using his death to commit fraud, not just against you, against everyone who invested in Hammond Shipping. Retirees, pension funds. When this house of cards falls, hundreds of people lose everything. What do you want me to do? What you do best? Stephanie smiled. Take them apart, but do it publicly. Make it count. After Stephanie left, Callie sat in Thomas's study, their study, and pulled up her laptop. The asset freeze only applied to her personal accounts. It didn't apply to Luminex Technologies' corporate holdings, and Luminex had resources that made Hammond Shipping look like a lemonade stand. She made 3 calls. First, her publicist at Luminex, dormant for 3 years, but still on retainer. Catherine, time to wake up. Forbes interview in 1 week. Tell them I'm ready to talk about everything. Second, her tech team at Luminex. Trace every document in the Hammond case. Show me the digital fingerprints. I want to know who wrote the fake medical records, who created the forgeries. Everything. Third, Nathan, her lawyer. File fraud charges against Bernard Hutchins, Preston Hammond, and Judge Holloway for falsifying evidence and judicial corruption. And Nathan, do it tomorrow morning, right before the Forbes interview goes live. She pulled up one more file. The thing Thomas had given her in his final week. The weapon he'd forged specifically for this moment. A video. Thomas, lucid and clear-eyed, recording his thoughts 2 weeks before death. If you're watching this, Callie, it means they came after you. I'm sorry. I hoped my family would surprise me, but I know them too well. He smiled weakly. You tried to tell me about your money so many times, and I stopped you because I didn't want it to matter. But I'm glad you finally did, because it means you can fight them with resources they never expected. He coughed, collected himself. I'm recording this to state clearly, for any legal proceeding, that I changed my will of my own free choice, in sound mind, fully aware of what I was doing. Callie, you gave me the best year of my life. You saw me, not Hammond legacy, not the disease, just me. That's worth more than all the money my family worships. Thomas looked directly into the camera. Preston, Diane, if you're watching this too, know that I knew. I knew about the embezzlement, the fraud, the shell games. And I gave Callie everything she needs to bring you down. Not for revenge, for protection. The company you're destroying was grandfather's life work. If you won't honor that, someone else will. The video ended. Callie closed her laptop, tears streaming down her face. Then she got to work. The Forbes article dropped at 6 a.m. on a Wednesday. The Invisible Billionaire, How Callie Reeves Built a Tech Empire, Walked Away, and Found Love in a Dying Man's Final Year. The photos were stunning. Professional shots of Callie in her Charleston townhouse, dressed elegantly but simply, looking nothing like the meek widow the Hammonds had painted. The article detailed everything: MIT, Luminex, the billions, her decision to vanish from tech circles, and prominently featured her marriage to Thomas. "People will say I married him for money," Callie was quoted. "The irony is, I probably have more money than his entire family combined. I married Thomas Hammond because he was kind, genuine, and saw past the noise to who I really am. He gave me the gift of being nobody special for 19 months. I loved him for that." The article included Thomas's video, the full recording, with timestamps and medical documentation proving he was lucid and competent. By 7 a.m., it was everywhere. Twitter exploded. LinkedIn went wild. Business networks picked it up. The Hammond family's fraud accusations looked absurd next to Forbes's imprimatur and Callie's documented billions. By 8 a.m., Nathan filed the criminal fraud charges, the fake medical documents, the forged testimony, the corrupt judge, all laid out with digital forensics showing Preston's team had created everything. By 9 a.m., the FBI announced they were investigating Hammond Shipping for securities fraud. By 10 a.m., Diane was giving a panicked press conference that made everything worse. "This doesn't change anything," she shouted at reporters. "She still manipulated my son." "Ma'am, your son stated clearly on video that he was of sound mind," a journalist called out. "And Forbes has verified Ms. Reeves's net worth at $2.8 billion. She's number 487 on their billionaire list. Why would she need your family's money?" Diane had no answer. The board meeting at Hammond Shipping happened that afternoon. Callie walked in as the majority shareholder, flanked by Nathan and a team of corporate attorneys. Preston sat at the head of the table looking like he'd aged 10 years. "All in favor of removing Preston Hammond as CEO pending fraud investigation?" Callie's voice was calm. Every hand rose except Preston's. "All in favor of appointing an independent financial auditor to investigate company accounts?" Every hand. Finally, all in favor of honoring Thomas Hammond's legacy by transforming Hammond Shipping into a transparent, ethical company that serves its investors and employees rather than enriching corrupt executives? Every hand. Preston stood slowly. "You're destroying my family." "No," Callie said. "I'm saving Thomas's legacy from what you turned it into." "There's a difference." But the real confrontation happened that evening, at Diane's home. Callie knocked on the door. Diane answered, face haggard, makeup ruined. "What do you want?" Diane's voice was broken. "You won. You destroyed us. I want you to understand something." Callie's voice was quiet, but unyielding. "Thomas loved you. Even after everything, he hoped you'd come visit him in the hospital for him, not the money. He hoped you'd hold his hand while he died. You never came." Diane's voice cracked. "You called me a gold digger while I sat beside your son for 19 months. I fed him when he couldn't hold a spoon. I read to him when the pain was too much for conversation. I held him while he died, Diane. Where were you?" Tears streamed down Diane's face. "The money doesn't matter," Callie said. "The company doesn't matter. What matters is, you had a son who loved you despite your cruelty, and you wasted his final year hunting for fortune instead of giving him one moment of real motherly affection. You can't buy that back. Not with anything." She turned to leave, then paused. "The house, the cars, the trust funds. I'm donating all of it. Pancreatic cancer research in Thomas's name. Every penny he left me goes to making sure other people have longer than 19 months with the people they love. That's what Thomas would have wanted." Diane collapsed into sobs. Callie walked away and didn't look back. 6 months later, Callie stood in front of a newly opened research facility in Charleston. The Thomas Hammond Center for Pancreatic Cancer Research gleamed in the morning sun, $47 million of state-of-the-art laboratories, patient care facilities, and hope. Every dollar from Thomas's estate transformed into something that would outlive all of them. "Thank you for coming," Callie told the gathered crowd, researchers, patients, families, not the social elite who'd watched her humiliation at the yacht club. Real people who needed what this building represented. She didn't mention the Hammond family. Diane had sold her remaining shares in Hammond Shipping and moved to Atlanta. Preston was awaiting trial for securities fraud. The company itself was being rebuilt under new leadership, cleaned of corruption, operating ethically for the first time in years. Judge Holloway had resigned. Bernard Hutchins was disbarred. The fake nurse disappeared. The fake doctor was arrested. Justice, served cold and complete. But it felt hollow. Callie returned to her townhouse that evening, the home she'd shared with Thomas, where they'd had 19 months of borrowed time. She'd kept it exactly as they'd left it. His books still on the shelves, his coffee mug still in the cabinet, his jacket still hanging by the door. Her phone buzzed. Stephanie Hammond. "You didn't have to give away the money," Stephanie said. "Thomas wanted you to have security." "I have security," Callie replied. "I had it before I met him. What I got from Thomas was worth more than any inheritance." "He'd be proud of you." Callie closed her eyes. "I hope so." After hanging up, she poured 2 whiskeys, one for her, one for the empty chair where Thomas used to sit. They'd done this every night during their 19 months, talking, laughing, being honest in ways neither had experienced before. "You were right," she told the empty room. "They came after me, and you gave me everything I needed to win." But winning felt like losing, because the revenge was complete, the justice delivered, the wrongs righted, and Thomas was still dead. The Hammonds were destroyed, but it didn't bring him back. She picked up the Forbes issue with her face on the cover. Number 487, Callie Reeves, 2.8b. They'd called her the invisible billionaire who chose love over legacy. The subtitle read, "Tech founder walked away from fame to spend a dying man's final year, showing him what love without agenda looks like." She'd won, completely and totally. But she'd trade every dollar, every victory, every moment of vindication for one more day with the man who'd loved her for being nobody special. Callie raised her glass to Thomas's empty chair. "To borrowed time," she whispered, "and making every second count." Outside, Charleston glittered with old money and older sins, but in this townhouse, in this moment, Callie held on to something the Hammonds would never understand. The memory of love given freely, without calculation, without agenda. They'd called her a gold digger. She'd proven she needed nothing from them. But the real revenge, the one that would haunt them forever, was simpler than money or Forbes lists or public humiliation. Thomas had chosen her, not them. And in his final year, surrounded by someone who loved him truly, he'd been happier than his entire life before. That truth would eat at them forever. Callie drank her whiskey and allowed herself a small, sad smile. Justice was served. Revenge was complete. But love, real, honest, borrowed love, that was the only thing that had ever really mattered. If this story resonated with you, subscribe to the Formidable Revenge channel for more stories of justice served cold. Hit that like button, share this with someone who needs to see karma in action, and comment below with your thoughts. Sometimes the best revenge isn't what you take, it's what you give. Until next time, remember, underestimate quiet people at your own risk.